Everyone. So today I'll be talking about security and privacy issues in smart health. Oops. Okay. First of all, a quick introduction about me. So I'm an assistant professor at UVA in computer science with joint appointment in ECE, and I've been here since 2020. And my research focuses on network security and privacy and measurement. I take a data-driven and application-driven approach to investigate these network security and privacy issues. And more specifically, some of the topics that I focus on first is the digital key management for different applications. More specifically, so we look at TLS, which is commonly used, but then how do we manage the keys that are needed in establishing TLS connections? I look at secure routing infrastructure and studying different vulnerabilities, security issues, and design how can we have a better routing infrastructure for security properties. And so we will also work a lot on anomaly detection, looking at network traffic, do attack detection and defenses. And finally, on the privacy side, we look at anonymous communications and privacy properties, and also, how do these anonymous communications look in emerging technologies, such as what if they use 5G or 6G? What are the new implications of the new components in those protocols? What are their effects on anonymous communications? So these are some of the example topics that I've been working on under this umbrella of network security and privacy. But what I'm going to focusing on today is specifically security and privacy properties in one application scenario that is smart health. And more specifically, what I'll be covering in today's talk would be focusing on those wearable, commercial, kind of off-the-shelf smart health devices, which, so think about like smart it could be smartphones, right? Because there are many health applications running on your smartphones. It could be the wearable fitness trackers, like like a Fitbit, Apple Watch, or a Mi Band. That's another one we looked at. Or it could be other smaller, simpler devices, such as a smart oximeter, right? That takes your oxygen level and then sync with your phone and record the data. It could be, there are many other ones, right? Like smart blood pressure monitor, smart weight scale, smart sleep analyzer. So basically these smart health-oriented devices that consumers may use to measure their health-related data. And then it's smart because there is network communication between the device with the phone or between the device and some cloud server. So that's kind of the realm of smart health devices that I'll be focusing on in this talk. And more specifically, I will quickly go through the privacy issues, right, including the works that we've been doing in our lab, and we look at security properties. And then finally, I'll get to possible defenses that we want to work on. First of all, privacy. But before getting into it, so I want to talk about this figure on the slide to kind of give an overview of where the communications are involving smart health devices. So at the bottom left corner, those are some examples of smart health devices that we are looking at, right? We have those small devices in our lab. And so as briefly mentioned, these smart health devices, they take certain type of health measurement data and they sync up the data with the cloud or the phone, right? So imagine that a lot of these devices now, they all have like a phone app, and then you can kind of take your health measurement on your device, and then you can like look at your phone, and which probably has a history of your health measurement data. So that's what the users can use to track their health history or health habits. So there is the device to phone connection, right? So that's the connection we see at the bottom. And if we look further into the communication protocols, that this device to phone connection actually uses, there could be a variety. Most commonly seen Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, right? So for Wi-Fi, usually it's those more like more well-established devices like, Apple Watch, Fitbit. A lot of them have Wi-Fi capabilities, so they can use Wi-Fi to connect to the phone. But then for a lot of the smaller devices, simpler devices like a smart oximeter, smart weight scale, most of them do not have Wi-Fi capability. And then what they will do is to use Bluetooth to sync up the data with the phone. So that's device to phone connection. So there's other communication protocols besides Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, but then these two are the majority. So that's why we're focusing on these two right now. So on the left-hand side, there's also device to cloud connectivity for, again, certain devices with Wi-Fi capabilities. Again, using Apple Watch as an example. It may not always sync directly to the phone, but it may sync with some Apple cloud server, right? Wherever your iCloud account is. It may sync up the data directly to the cloud. And that's on Wi-Fi. And so there's the device to cloud connectivity through the Wi-Fi that the device is connected to. Let's say your home Wi-Fi, right? On the right-hand side, there could also be phone to cloud connectivity, and from your phone to some cloud server operated by the manufacturer of the device. Say a device sync up to the phone, and the phone sync up the health data to the cloud, such that maybe if you download the app in a different device and you log into your account, you also see your health data, health history. So that's done through the cloud servers. So these are the three legs of connections that we want to look at, which all involve data measured from these smart health devices. So the first thing we want to investigate is the potential information leakage through the communication metadata in any of these three legs of connections. So this type of leakage, it's more like inferred information from the metadata of communications. And this is applicable even if all the communications are encrypted, right? Why? We're not breaking the encryption in any case in this type of scenario. The adversary is more like a passive adversary on the communication path, right? Say between device to cloud and between phone to cloud. If the adversary is somewhere along these communications who can observe the packets, even if it's encrypted packets, then the adversary can use metadata information from the communication, again, without breaking any encryption, to infer user information or device information. Why? Because the metadata information could include, say, timing of the packet, right? You observe a packet or traffic at this particular time point. And they can also observe the size of the traffic, like how many bytes are being sent, how many bytes are being received. They could also observe port numbers, like when, say, for example, when the device sends some data to the cloud server, what's the destination port number it is connecting to? Or maybe there is a domain name, which is pretty common on the cloud server, and the device is actually connecting to that particular domain name. And what is that domain name? So all these are like metadata information that can be observed, even if the packet is encrypted and we're not breaking any encryption. And similarly, down there between the device to phone, that's a little bit different because it's commonly done through Bluetooth for smaller devices. So the metadata information there is a bit different, like there's no domain name, right? But some of the other information is similar, like timing of the data and size of the data. So why do these metadata matter, right? Like what are the privacy implications? Because there is actually a strong connection between the metadata and the device information or user activity. So take device information as an example. If you see the device, say, again, I'm making up this example, but it's pretty similar in real world cases. Say, if you observe the device to cloud connection and you observe that the domain name says oximeter.org, right? Then without looking at anything else in the traffic, then you can reasonably infer that, hey, the device is likely an oximeter, right? Because it's connecting to this domain called oximeter.org. So this is one straightforward example. But based on existing studies and also our own study, there is actually a very strong pattern for each device in terms of the metadata in their connection. There's pretty much fixed list of domains they would connect to and fixed list of port numbers. And then, so those are useful information to infer the device type, right? And this matters because maybe there's some device, say for example, blood pressure, right? If you know that someone's using the blood pressure, then you can probably infer that this person may have some health concerns related to blood pressure. That's why they're using blood pressure to monitor so frequently. So that's an example of potential privacy implication of knowing the device type. So that's kind of inferring the device type. And we can also do more fine-grained inference on the user activity. Why? Because so imagine that you're using, say, a fitness tracker. You will only observe the traffic, let's say device to cloud traffic, if the user is working out, is exercising. That's when the data is generated and the data is being sent. So when the user is not doing anything, there may not be any data or very minimum data exchanged. So by just looking at the timing and the size of the data that's being sent or received, you can kind of infer how frequently the user exercises and and how long each exercise period is. And then there are also cases that we perform this kind of inference that we can even use the intensity, the density of the traffic patterns to infer the intensity of user activities. Say if the user is wearing a fitness tracker and it's like running, the faster the user runs, the more dense the packets are in the communication to the cloud. So by just kind of building a machine learning model on that, we will be able to infer pretty accurately how fast the user is running when the user is wearing the fitness tracker. So all these are examples of potentially privacy intruding information that we can infer through the communication metadata without breaking any encryption, and because all that information is not encrypted. So this is one big category of privacy threats involving smart health devices, and actually it's generally applicable to IoT devices, but then smart health devices potentially contain more sensitive health data. So that's what makes it worse. So there's the other category of privacy threats when no encryption is used, right? So when there's no encryption, then all your data, all your health data, or whatever data that's sent over the communication link would be pretty much out in the clear. So this is an example screenshot from communication from a Withings device to the cloud. So you can clearly see that the name of it's a Withings app. So you can clearly see that what's the content of the communication, like what's the name of the URL. So you know that it's a blood pressure, you know the user ID, so nothing's encrypted, and potentially there's more sensitive data that I'm not showing here. So this is when no encryption is used, which is definitely a lot worse. And so next, so aside from the privacy threats, which involve more like a passive adversary, let me put it here, which involves more like a passive adversary on these communication links, sniffing or eavesdropping on the traffic. the adversary is not doing anything like active in terms of like launching an attack. They're more like passively observing the traffic and then perform inference on the observed traffic. And on the other hand, it's more in the kind of security threats domain. We're looking at active adversaries who are actively performing attacks to either gain visibility into the traffic or even tamper with the data. So I put this whole big category of attackers as like the man-in-the-middle attacks, because the attacker is trying to get itself at kind of into the middle of the communication and gain more visibility, meaning more visibility than just the metadata, right? The adversary actually want to see the encrypted content of the data. So that's why I put like the break it encryption here, and I put breaking code. So we're not really breaking the ciphers, like we're not breaking the algorithms, but more like the adversary is injecting itself into the communication so it can gain visibility into whatever content that's encrypted, without actually brute forcing and breaking the algorithms, the ciphers, right? So this is one example of a man-in-the-middle attack that we did on smart health devices. In this case, a smart oximeter. And we're doing this on Bluetooth, where the smart oximeter is connected with the phone as the kind of through Bluetooth connection, because it doesn't have Wi-Fi capability. And so basically the device A on the left-hand side, which is the real phone, and device B on the right-hand side, that's the real oximeter. And then they're supposed to connect through Bluetooth and like interchange traffic, right? Like your oxygen level measurement. So how do we insert into this Bluetooth connection? So we put up two devices, right? Which are the two in the middle. One is the fake kind of device acting as the oximeter, but it doesn't have to be an oximeter. It can be like any whatever. It can be like a Raspberry Pi that we're running some software on. And then and there is also the fake central, which is like the fake phone. Again, it doesn't have to be the actual phone. It can be whatever device that has Bluetooth capability, and then that can connect to other devices through Bluetooth. Again, these two fake devices, they do not have to be exactly the phone or the oximeter. It can be any like Bluetooth capable device. Okay, so how does this work? So when device A, which is the phone, and device B, the real oximeter, when they're trying to pair with each other through Bluetooth, essentially in the connection establishing process in Bluetooth, the attackers are the attacker with the two devices is gonna inject into this pairing process, and then using the fake device to establish connection with the phone, and use the fake central, the fake phone device, to establish Bluetooth connection with the device B, the real oximeter. And then these two fake devices, they're going to be forwarding traffic between the device A and device B, such that the traffic keeps flowing and etc. But since they inject themselves into this Bluetooth communication, so essentially device A and device X on the left-hand side, they're having their own Bluetooth connection. And device X on the right-hand side, the phone, the fake phone, is in this established Bluetooth connection with device B, the oximeter. They are already kind of in the encryption themselves, so they will be able to gain visibility into whatever data that's exchanged. So imagine that the device B, the oximeter, it measures your oxygen level, right? So it actually sends the oxygen level data through the Bluetooth connection, but to the fake central, the phone, right? The attacker's phone. And the attacker's phone, it's gonna kind of record the data and look at what your oxygen level is. And then it's gonna forward it to this fake device on the left-hand side. And this fake device will further forward the data through the Bluetooth connection to the device A, which is the real phone belonging to the user. So from the user's perspective, what they will see is, oh, it's actually working because you measure the oxygen level and the data actually shows up on the user's phone as usual. So, it's seemingly that there's nothing wrong. But then in this middle of the communication process, the data actually goes through these attackers' devices, and therefore the attacker can see the data. And in terms of requirement, the attacker, in order to establish Bluetooth connections, the attacker needs to be within certain physical proximity to the user, and depending on what's the range of the Bluetooth, right? So yeah, the attacker does need to be in certain physical proximity, but not it's not necessary to be literally right next to the user. So that's kind of the experiments that we did to demonstrate that it is actually possible for man-in-the-middle attackers to inject into this Bluetooth communication process. And so what's the vulnerability that we exploit? It's vulnerabilities in this Bluetooth pairing protocol called JustWorks. It is like the simplest Bluetooth pairing protocol that's like very commonly used, especially for smaller devices, right? So JustWorks, it's very straightforward. It doesn't even involve like setting up any pairing code, which you may commonly see in like when you pair your phone with the car or something, right? Usually in those like more secure pairing protocols, you have to put in like passcode or something. But then in smaller devices, there isn't really capability to put in any like a pairing passcode. So whatever pairing code that needs to be used, it's all hard-coded, and they usually use commonly known, passcode for pairing, which makes it very easy to inject and to basically do what we just showed here. So the consequence of these man-in-the-middle attacks, apparently, they inject into the communication and essentially can read the user health data directly once successfully injected. So what do we learn from this? Devices, especially a lot of the small smart health devices that, they just don't have a lot of computing capabilities. They are not using up-to-date protocols, and they're not following best security practices. And this is a very prevalent issue in IoT devices in general, including smart health devices. So we did a study on kind of just measuring the prevalence of similar issues by using a crowdsourced data set from consumer homes. So in other words, we're essentially studying like home IoT devices. And so our crowdsourced data set has over 9,500 IoT devices across over 2,200 users. And so the first thing we measure is actually how many of these devices in our data set actually use TLS connections. So TLS is kind of the de facto encryption protocol used for internet communications. Okay, not Bluetooth, but internet communications. So the first thing we found is that less than 25% of devices would use encryption at all to protect their data. So in other words, 75% of the devices, they don't use encryption at all. So whatever data they send would be out in the clear. You don't even need to do man-in-the-middle attacks on those devices because you can see the data already, right? So that's pretty bad. And now we take a further look at the 25% of devices that actually use encryption to protect their communication through the internet, right? Let's say between the device and the cloud server that they're sending the data to. So how do those 25 devices look? Like, are they using, the question we want to answer is, are they using like up-to-date version of the security protocols, right? The versions without vulnerabilities, and are they following best practices in this process, like key management? So first of all, I want to kind of do a very quick background on this TLS connections that we're looking at. So basically, so in this process, there's client hello and server hello to establish the TLS connection. And so one key part in this client and server hello process is to agree on a list of ciphers or cipher suite that they will use to encrypt the subsequent data communications. So in other words, if they're up to date, if they're using like latest versions, they should be using secure ciphers instead of using the older cipher, outdated ciphers with known vulnerabilities, right? So that's number one. And number two is look at the certificate step where the server sends its own certificate, which has its public key to the user, to the client, and the client is going to use the public key from the certificate to encrypt the next message. So correctly and securely managing the certificate, which has the public key, would be quite essential. So those are the two parts that I'm going to show here. The ciphers, it's more about the client responsibility because whatever version running on the client is the one that decides what's the cipher suite list that is gonna kind of propose to use. And the certificate management is more of the responsibility of the server. The server needs to correctly manage the certificate and its public key. So this is one of the many results that we found. So this figure shows the TLS libraries, which has, and I'm not showing the exact library versions here, but more about the ciphers used by the clients. And the clients are the IoT devices, which is on the x-axis, showing the manufacturer of the device. So we're not showing the device type here, but just keep in mind that for each manufacturer shown on the x-axis, there could be many different devices, device types, and etc. And the y-axis, that's showing the ciphers. And specifically, all the ciphers we're showing here, they are vulnerable ciphers, meaning outdated ciphers with known vulnerabilities that, if you follow the best security practice, you're not supposed to be using those ciphers anymore. So what we're seeing here is that, by the way, the darker the color, the more devices from that manufacturer are using a particular given insecure ciphers. So what we're seeing here is that a lot of these manufacturers, more or less, they all use the insecure ciphers in their communications. So especially if we look at, say, Epson, that's pretty bad. You see a lot of usage of the insecure ciphers, and then similarly for some of the other ones on the left-hand side. And so as you can see, all these are not all, but like a lot of them are actually pretty popular manufacturers, right? Like Epson, Belkin, iRobot, and etc. So what does this indicate? It indicates that a lot of the client side, meaning the IoT devices, they're very outdated. They are using very outdated libraries with known vulnerabilities that could be susceptible to man-in-the-middle attacks, similar to the man-in-the-middle attack that we just showed. Which is summarized here, device using outdated and vulnerable ciphers. And the other side, we also did a lot of investigation on the server side, the servers that are communicating with these IoT devices and the servers that are providing the certificates. And so it's not that much better on the server side. Many servers are actually using expired certificates and the clients don't do any check, right? The IoT devices, they just use the expired certificates anyway. And even for the non-expired certificates, many servers put a very long validity period on the certificates, like making it valid for 100 years, or I think we saw in one case, like 1,000 years. So essentially, they do not want to do any active certificate management They just create a certificate and make it valid pretty much forever, much longer than the lifespan of the devices, and just kind of get done with it. And likely, they don't monitor the security of the certificates. They don't do any auditing. So if the certificates are compromised, likely they're not going to do anything about it, right? So these concerning practices from both the IoT devices and the servers that they're connecting to raise a lot of alarms. Essentially, they are making themselves vulnerable to man-in-the-middle attacks that could inject into their communication to look at what data they're sending, even if, because they essentially break the encryption. And they could either tamper with the traffic, right? Sending malicious traffic and etc. So taking a step back, so the issue that we're looking at here is that these, first of all, like a lot of these devices, they don't use encryption in the first place. And second, for the ones that use encryption, they are not following best practice and they're not doing it in a secure way. And we want to ask why. Why is it the case? So essentially, we believe that it's a lot harder to do this type of key management for devices, small devices. So not like your computer or your smartphones that are more capable. You can run all these like sophisticated and secure protocols on it. It's very hard to do all these complex management on small devices, right? So we see the issue with TLS and the certificate management. And similarly for Bluetooth, it's more or less a similar issue, right? Like they're not capable of generating on-the-fly passcode, so they have to use whatever that's hard-coded, that's not secure. So now we want to get into the defenses in the last 10 minutes or so. So first of all, I want to quickly talk about the privacy defenses that against the privacy intruding inference that I mentioned at the beginning. Basically, a passive adversary looking at the traffic patterns, looking at the metadata without breaking the encryption at all, and perform inference on user activity, device type, that kind of stuff. So there is a whole line of work focusing on this, right? For example, if the attackers rely on traffic patterns like timing, packet size to do such inference, then maybe we can perturb the traffic patterns. Maybe you periodically send traffic even when there's no user activity, or maybe you randomize your packet sizes to make it less identifiable. So this is one line of the defense that some of the prior works have explored. But we did a recent study on this, and we found that it's actually very difficult to completely perturb the data. Because, okay, so you can perturb the timing and packet size, but there's other metadata information that's still visible. For example, the domain name, right? Which can be used to infer the device type, or the port number, because a lot of the manufacturers, they use unique port numbers on their servers that their devices would connect to. And then so perturbing that, it means you got to randomize your port number and you have to do device update to make them, maybe they should have a pool of random port numbers to choose from. So it does make it a lot more difficult to do this. So that's something that we found. Yes, you can perturb part of the metadata, but it's difficult to perturb all of the metadata without, incurring additional overhead for the servers and for the devices. So that's the kind of potential defenses against the passive adversaries who are doing passive inference. And then getting into the man-in-the-middle attack category. So, of course, there are many different attack vectors. And then if we want to secure it, we have to do protection defenses against all those attack vectors, which is actually very broad. But what I'm going to focusing on right now would be the key management part, right? because we know that key management is difficult for smaller devices and also small device vendors that just don't have the capability as some of the bigger vendors. And so they are doing this kind of very simple and creative way in some sense of managing the keys, like signing a certificate with the key and making it last forever, like 100 years. So I put PKI here. We're not going too much into it, but what I'm referring to would be the current public key infrastructure that's kind of the de facto key management scheme used by a lot of entities in the current internet. And so that's what we notice what a lot of device vendors are using too. So we want to kind of question that, right? Like, yes, the current PKI, it's very effective for the web, right? Like your servers domain names expecting web clients connected via browsers on laptops, computers, or phones. So that works pretty well. But then is that really a good solution or key management scheme for this IoT scenario, including smart health? So that's when we started exploring other alternatives, such as DNS-based key management, which is a different architecture and it has its own advantages, of course, and challenges. But then we're investigating it mostly because it's more capable of supporting key management or certificates signed by all these individual device vendors that are not part of the kind of centralized trusted certificate authority ecosystem that are more used for the web. The device vendors, a lot of them don't really go to these trusted certificate authorities for certificate or key management. They prefer doing it themselves, and they have good reasons to do it that way. So then we want to figure out, so what's the right scheme for these device vendors who just want to do it themselves. So that's when we turn to DNS. And yeah, so this slide actually lists a lot of the I would say mostly completed works from our group supporting this kind of or showing this challenge in key management by a lot of the different entities that in these cases are very hard to fit under the current PKI ecosystem. And so I'm not gonna, okay, so the first bullet point actually talks about the IoT device vendor investigation that I just mentioned. And the second one, so we did a very large scale measurement study looking at certificates signed by non-trusted certificate authorities, especially client certificates, and there's a lot. So essentially, we have a lot of certificates in different scenarios, including IoT and smart health devices, that they're signed by non-trusted certificate authorities. And then, so therefore, all these certificates, they're kind of out of the sight of any public auditing and certificate validation and all that kind of stuff. And so that motivates our ongoing work on kind of exploring DNS-based key management for these emerging applications, such as IoT, cyber physical system, including smart health, and potentially there can be a lot more applications, such as LoRaWAN, or the most recent Matter kind of protocol for IoT communications. So there's a whole realm of emerging applications with the need for key management. So right now, they either kind of come up with their own infrastructure, or they just rely on the current PKI to do it, which in our opinion may not be the best solution ever. And so this is something we're exploring. So these are kind of some of the factors. The bullet points show some of the factors or challenges that we are exploring under this DNS-based key management. And so the goal is that, so the way we're investigating it is more in an application-driven way. We look at the needs from applications like IoT and smart health and other cyber physical systems. And then we see how these needs could be satisfied by this DNS-based key management, and what are the new things we could do in the protocol side to support the needs of the applications. So that goes back to kind of the high-level earlier approach I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, that we want to do both data-driven network security, which is what I just showed in the previous slide, right? We want to collect data to understand what the challenges are. And then we want to do application-driven network security, which is what I'm showing this slide as our ongoing work, that we want to understand the needs of the applications, which will be used to inform the protocol design. And yeah, so I think this is my last slide. Yes. And so that concludes the talk on security and privacy issues and potential solutions, at least focusing on key management for smart health devices, but which could be broadened up to many other IoT devices and cyber physical systems.